Long time no see, everybody. This is your hostess, Flamingo Writer, here speaking to you all once again, and we're back again for another Magical Girl podcast video. Sometimes I kind of have to wonder if I should rename this podcast into Magical Girl and Magical Boy, a podcast. But I'm not going to do that for obvious reasons because of one. There aren't that many Magical Boy shows to see. As I alluded to in my last video, in my Magic Users Club video, I said before that I'm kind of a sucker for magical boys if they are something that can be seen at times. While I admit that magical boys are something that I don't see that often, that doesn't mean I can't help but hunt them and see what goes on anyways. Because guess what? Magical boys do exist. They're just a lot rarer to find even nowadays more than ever before. Ever since the like of Q High Earth Defense Club, magical boys have been getting made into something like parodies, something like comedies, and something along the lines of that anyways. But Magic Users Club was one of the older entries that only had two magical boys, and those weren't really straight up comedies. They were mostly focusing on something like friendship and everything like that, which fair is fair. I'm not saying you can't focus on friendship, but there are some other times where you can make magical boys straightforward. And today we're actually looking at another Magical Boy show that doesn't get brought up a lot in many regards, even those who are Magical Girl fans. That series being Fetty Ranmaru. Fetty Ronmaru is one of those shows that I've actually have wanted to talk about for a while now, but for some reason I just keep putting it off. Released in 2021, which is kind of weird because I thought it would be a little younger than that. But honestly, when it comes to a series like this, yeah, I had this on the back burner for quite some time, up there with the Q High Earth Defense Club in 2023. But I never could ever get my chance to watch it anyways. So I decided to watch it, and something happened. Oh, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't find anything bad necessarily, but let's talk about Fetty Ronmaru in itself and see if it's just as funny as Q High Earth Defense Club, or maybe there's something there that made it a little different. But regardless, let's get right into it. This is Fetty Ronmaru. Fetty Ronmaru is the story about five Fetty men who are sent to Earth to collect human attachment to heal and broken and to save their dying fairy world, while still running a high schoolers for them to work at a mysterious bar known as Bar F. They battle dark and emotional monsters that corrupt some of their clients along the way, while still doing whatever they can. The five members, Lux, Ignis, Aqua, Harbor, and Melon, for the fairy clans, and as such, they do everything they can in order to make sure that nothing from their heartbreak or trauma gets into this anyways. While they disguise as humans to pose as high school students, they do whatever they can to make sure that their target client will basically have them get kissed so they can and do just that whenever they get around to these girls, so they can beat feet to any kind of bad guy is out there. As the character suggests, we have Ranmaru I, representing the Lux clan, as he works hard to understand the root that causes any sort of humans that suffer from there. There's Hanmaru Hodora, represents the Ignis clan, and it's also Yuru is the Aqua clan, as and Juka the represents the Arbor clan, specializing in healing, and finally Takara Oshi Hero, who represents the Lenham clan, who oversees financial affairs. Together, while they bound the and Fetty laws, the most notable being that they're forbidden from romantic or sexual relationships with humans. However, their mission requires them to navigate them deeply complex into human emotions. In this standard as it gets from there on. No matter what happens, they'll do anything to help protect these human girls, and as such, do whatever they can to protect them for any sort of evil erupts them from deep within inside, as luck would have it. So I've got to say, for a series like this, it sounds like yet again another Magical Boy parody, because it does have those there anyways. But while this was made by the same studio who gave us said series, Q High, it actually isn't really anything like that. While it was animated there from Studio Comet, a studio that I brought up in the Q High Earth Defense Club video, I think it's only worth mentioning that this is one of those cases where this is not a parody. Instead, this is a straight up slice of life school series with a bit of slice of life into it, and as well as, say, a Monster of the Week show. And right away, I can definitely tell this is one of those cases where I have to put my thumb down and say that I don't know if anyone would watch this as much as they can. Now, granted, I wouldn't say it's a disappointment, but if you aren't into Monster of the Week shows, you're gonna be kind of disappointed with this one. But let's talk about the things that I like. That way, you'll get a much better understanding of what the series does in a ways, and in some cases here and there. So at least there are some things I can say that I like about it. What I do like about the series is that, unlike the previous Magical Boy shows, unless you count Magical Girl Ore, this is one case where this in of itself actually has the boys again into counterparts that you wouldn't recognize if you were watching the series like I have, because the counterparts they have go more into, say, their bulkier look and their prettier look, if anything. Not gonna lie, some of these here styles do look like they came out of JoJo, if anything. Fitting, considering that I will say, hey, that the man service is there, but this isn't like, say, made for a male audience. This was made for a female demographic, if anything, to judge by. But that being said, however, I do like how they give their alter egos a bit more different than their original counterparts. Like, I showed you what they look like in their human attire, while in their fairy form, they just go with that. And with that form to make it look like their alter egos are going in far and beyond that. And while there are a bit of questionable elements here and there, the animation itself does look pretty beautiful. Again, made by the same studio, that's to be expected. But I also like another thing about this series, and that's one of the things I don't really hear people talk about, their themes. Yeah, whenever the boys transform, you hear a theme going on with each and every one of them to go with whenever they battle. And I really do like how they transform into their own way, because if you look it up on YouTube, you're gonna find them transforming into their own separate ways. Granted, every time you do watch the series for yourself, it's like, say, you get 2 episodes per of the 5 characters in order to see how they transform and everything. So, for example, when you see the first boy, you're gonna see the first boy transform in episode 1 and episode 6, and it goes like that, in a pattern order, if anything, to judge by. I'm not going to say it's egregious, but hey, at least we actually have boys transforming, but they usually transform all together in the last 2 episodes, which, I'm not going to mince words, does feel kind of disappointing. That's how long it takes for them to do the final battle, but hey, you be the judge of that, if anything. What I also like about the series is that it also does something that you don't really see that often when it comes to the male characters having their own lead. You think that it would be like, say, the character that dresses in like a pinkish, orangish color or something like that, right? Well, you'd be wrong, because they actually made the nerd here more into him making his own looking like that when it comes to that. The leader. I will say that despite having his own way of looking like he's made into a pretty boy, that's kind of hilarious in its own way, because let's be real here, I'm pretty sure all of us nerds want someone to stop thinking us as the wimpy one, but yeah, he actually is the leader of this, if you want to call him that, if anything, because he doesn't really show that he's shy away from that. But they do seem to have this notion with they'll sense something, but he also does tell the others that there's someone in danger and need, so there's that. I also like that Ranmaru, despite what you think of him, actually does seem like he's really looking forward to saving the day and stuff like that. So there's that going for it. But by saving the day, I don't mean that he just says, oh, I'm going to save this person because I'm the socially awkward type or anything, like he's self-aware. No, like I said, this isn't a parody, so you're not going to find that. But what I am saying is that he actually is used to doing his job, so you can clearly tell he's really into it. And also, I have to fully admit, these designs do go hard if you think. If you ever ask me to pick a favorite, however, that would probably be Homura Haratose, who turns into this really badass looking fire fairy, if anything, to judge by. Seriously, he looks like a god when I look at him. Though, admittedly, I think it really fits, considering he does go short-tempered at times. Though, I shouldn't really say anything about the name Homura. Seriously, fuck that guy. Anyways, I think what really gets me about Homura here is that despite what you may think of his own appearance, he does seem like he really isn't hints into too far about his job, but after getting some convincing that he really has to do what he does, it's really shown that he really does whatever he can to fight back. And I have to fully admit, watching the series whenever he's on screen, I thought at first he'd be just a jerk and nothing more, which, yeah, these characters are hard to stomach right now. Not to say they're hated, but I'll get to it. I think what gets to me is that I really think that he really suits the whole fire temper thing anyways. I don't know if it's just me, but I have a weakness for magical girls or magical boys, depending on what I'm watching, that have fire as their own power, if anything like that. I don't know, maybe it's because of how hot fire can be at times, and I can see where that gets that, or maybe it's because I'm still writing about magical boys with their own powers, so you be the judge of that. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm rambling on about it, but Fetty Ronmaru had something that I unfortunately have to discuss about. Now, bear with me when I say that I'm not saying that this year's series is bad necessarily, like I said, but it's one of those cases where you're going to find a mix between good and bad. Like, it's still a good series, but you're going to find flawed things into it, if anything. So let's go over one of the arguments I do hear people talk about. So you remember when I said that this is somewhat of a Monster of the Week show? Yeah, this is one of those cases where, despite lasting for 12 episodes, which does feel like you could have a story into it, and like I said in one of my videos, there's nothing wrong with having a short story lasting for 12 or 13 episodes, as long as it actually gets going. But if you're someone who's into Monster of the Week shows, you might want to watch this for yourself if you really are into something like that. But I'm not gonna lie, nowadays more than ever before, I think this may be a turnoff for some people. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with having an episodic show here, y'all, but what I am saying is that sometimes it feels like the writers just wanted to go with that instead of the show that we got from Q High, if anything. And I'm not here to tell you that Q High is a better chance to watch, if anything, because it's a lot more LOL out loud. But in this year's show, while I admit the transformations themselves are kind of funny if you want to see how they transform, yeah, whenever they kiss a human girl, they usually have the human girl get turned into these dusts or little fairy lights, if anything. I don't know, because you hear them kiss and after that they transform just to beat whatever they had. And it goes without saying that, yeah, this is one case where you kind of do feel like the more you watch this show, the more you start asking yourself that there is going to be a bit of story, but the story itself doesn't really come into place until we start seeing, at the end of every episode, you see the queen, if anything, the judge by. Anyways, I won't lie, despite the queen actually being the main antagonist of the show, she's only there to do whatever she can to defeat these boys. And while I admit I like the role reversal here, it just goes without saying you're gonna get a rush to climax afterwards anyway. I'm not against the idea for having 12 episodes, but if you're going to be doing a Monster of the Week show, it just goes without saying that 12 episodes itself can be a bit, it's claustrophobic and clunky in some cases here and there. I'll put it to you like this. Whenever there are some magical girl shows I watch that have 12 episodes, usually the story would kick in immediately, even if there are some things here and there that you can explore for yourself. But when it comes to something that has episodic shows and doesn't have anything but story in the last 1 or 2 episodes, I think a lot of people start asking themselves, why didn't they do this to begin with? I think that's kind of the problem I have with the show, but it's not really a big problem, like say it's the end of the world problem or anything. No, I'm just telling you how I feel about it. As I alluded to many times over, and I'll say it again here, I'm only telling you what I personally think. You don't have to agree with what I have to say, and that's all there is. And the sad thing is, however, I think this is why some people might find it a sleeper hit. I mean, say what you want and about some of the other magical boy shows I've talked about in my podcast, but at least in those cases, I can at least say, even if one's a lot more popular and one that actually does have something that goes with the parody, if anything, I'm just going to come out and say it really depends on what you're looking for. Because right down to its own limits, you're going to find some people saying that they're going to have one or the other for quite some time now. And when you get right down to it, Fetty Ranmaru does have things that you kind of wish they could have explored a little more. Like what makes them want to come to this earth or something. Like, they do explain in every opening that they came here to take your, to who love you and everything like that, like say take your heart and everything like that, but I find that more of an expression more than anything else. Granted, I thought at first it would be something that would you find funny, but like I said, this is more straightforward and slice of life. You're not gonna find LL funnies out loud unless you find the transformations that kind of funny. But unlike said so series I've said before, you're not gonna find this here series like say, oh, they're self-aware of it. I am glad that they actually made something a little different, because how many magical boy shows can you come up with that don't do comedies all the time? And before you say it, no, I'm not saying I didn't find the comedy humorous. I'm just saying because the comedy itself can be a hit or miss thing. Everyone has their own brand of humor, and that's really what it boils down to. But let's talk about the Queen for a second, because I feel like whenever I do see the Queen, I kind of feel like there was a bit of missed opportunity with her. Despite having a bit of a controlling way of looking at this so she can do something to the boys, you'd think that she would do more than just that, however, but from what I can tell, she's really known as the control freak, and as well as an elegant gothic Lolita, if anything. Now, granted, I'm glad they don't do anything to sexualize her, so there's that going for it. Again, I know that this is made for women in mind, so I don't think they would do that, unless they have something to do with man service, which, yeah, they have hot tubs almost every episode, so there's that going for it. But I must stress enough that one thing that I find disappointing about the Queen, this is just my opinion, is that you're not going to find her do too much to the boys until the last episode. I'm not kidding. The last episode itself has her going completely going to the boys and just to do something like that, but it isn't until, say, near the climax of what it is. And despite looking like she could actually try her best to do whatever she can to do it, it's already resolved in the last episode, which feels kind of rushed in some cases. Her formula of the character doesn't help much either, because most of what I got from her is that she controls everything around her until she is capable of still satisfied with what she gets and everything, and that's about it. I wouldn't say she's really someone that acts like a spoiled brat or anything, because she doesn't really have that kind of personality where, oh, she's gonna get what she wants if she acts like a crybaby. Despite what she looks, she's actually a lot older than the boys are, like even decades apart, despite the boys looking like teenagers. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like that idea, but it's kind of sad that the most you're gonna get from her is just acting like she's calm and collective with herself, while acting like she can get whatever she wants when she gets her own way in a calm manner. Not to say that's a bad idea, but I'm glad they didn't make her over the top or anything, otherwise she'd probably be too annoying afterwards. But later on, and I know this is a spoiler, but yeah, you're gonna find the climax pretty rushed, and most of these characters' personalities are not something I call deep, but you're something you've seen before. And by character types, I mean ones that you've seen before. The cool collective type, the hot-headed type, the nerd type, the flirty type, and the one that's pretty much the worrywart type. Not bad types of personalities, but types that you've seen before. And I'm pretty sure that even if you do have them get developed over time, it's going to be saying that you're just going to find this more episodic than having development. Like character driven, if you get what I'm saying. Not saying that's a bad thing, but it's still there if you want to get right down to it anyways. I'm sorry if it doesn't sound like I'm too enthusiastic with this here series in of its own self, but really, watching Fetty Ronmaru left me conflicted more than saying I liked it or I disliked it. It's one of those cases where I just really wish there was some more for me to say. Say what you want about some of the other magical boy shows I've covered on this podcast, but I feel like when it comes to Fetty Ronmaru, not many people are going to have a lot of same opinions over and over again, because there are some people out there that like this series, and some them just say that there's wasted opportunity. And unfortunately for my category, I just feel like it's one of those in between. Like, it has that potential, it just never ran with the potential for me personally. But I think the only potential I can at least give it is that it did what it could do. And on that note, I'm saying that this is only just my opinion only, and that's really something I need you to understand. By the time I was making this video, I already knew this was going to be part of my podcast one of these days. I just didn't know when. Fetty Ronmaru is not a bad series, but it's not something I call a masterpiece either. It's one of those shows that if you are into something that does give you a more or a way of saying that it can be episodic, then you can pretty much watch the series at your own leisure. But if you're looking for something story driven, you're just gonna find something that's more or on the character driven moments than you are about story driven moments. I'm not gonna lie to you guys and say that this is not anything bad or anything like that, but if I was ranking all these year shows that I covered on my podcast, this would probably be somewhere in the middle. Not necessarily anything average to make it to say, oh, I should have known this was coming. No, average as in there was so much I could have liked, if anything, to judge by. And the sad thing is, however, when it comes to magical boy shows, maybe that's why some people don't like having magical boy shows get their own focus at times, because they think that they can't do anything about it. Besides, we might as well make them parodies, if anything, with that standard. I'll put it to you like this. Whenever I do talk about magical girl shows in my podcast, I don't want to just focus on just magical girls because I think they're the only ones that exist according to a lot of people. Magical boys do exist, people, they just don't exist that often, and it's pretty rare to see them on screen, if anything. But I can't really blame anyone who didn't know that because, like I said, these year shows never got released out of Japan, and unfortunately, the only way you can find these is if you're either on Crunchyroll or on something that give you a website to see, honestly. You know, the more I look at these here, a friend came up to me about this and saying that, why do I care so much about magical boys? But then I start asking myself, why do I do this podcast anyways? But there was something else I knew. Not gonna name any names or anything like that, but there was this one person who was my friend when he was in my server asking me, why don't they have Saint Tail on, where can he find Saint Tail if it's anything that he can just find all of the episodes downloaded and to make an English dub. And he seemed kind of disappointed when I said that they never did well its own English audience, speaking audience out there. And that's kind of sad when you think about it. Like I said before, magical girl shows have come a long way, and it seems like no matter what you think to seek out for them, you're not going to find too many English dubs here and there when it comes to that. And I feel pretty bad anyways, because as someone who's a magical girl fan, you're looking at her, it goes without saying that's what I think about a lot of these shows. You're not going to find them have translated into English, if anything, to judge by. And worst of all, the only one I can think of, even though it's like a half-ish magical girl and magical boys show, would have to be the last series I covered, Magic Users Club. Magical boys shows are not likely to have an appeal audience like magical girl shows do, sure, but personally I think that's a bit unfair because I still think magical boy shows are worth exploring. Even if you could ignore that, however, I still think Fetty Ronmaru is worth a chance if you want to see for yourself. I'm not gonna say this month has been pretty because the last time I've had a video was again from my Magic Users Club video. And I feel like that's really sad of itself. I do apologize in advance if my videos have been sporadic when it comes to the summertime, but if you've been with me since 2024 or last year or even hell, just this year, then I'm just going to say summertime was never a good time for me to do videos, period, because of all the struggles I've been facing. And unfortunately, I don't know when the next video will come out because of that anyways, considering that I still have a lot of work to do. But honestly, that's really something I have to at least expect, because like I said, summertime is just never a time for me to do these here videos, period. But you know, the more I look at these podcast episodes, I still maintain this podcast to be something I still look into. Magical Girl will always be my favorite genre, even if some people don't care for it. Hell, even talking about it to some friends can be a reason why I still want to look at this for myself and see what it is. Every time I look back at my podcast, I start realizing something. I started making this podcast because I really wanted to show off what I can do with my own passion and everything. I still love magical girl shows to this day because not only is it my favorite genre, but it also influenced me for what I want to be when it comes to writing a magical girl series in itself. I'm not going to guarantee you all of my magical girl podcast episodes are something that you should really check out for yourself, but if anything, that's why I still do this podcast to this day. I started this podcast back in May of 2020. Hey, fourth. That was 2 years ago. And even to this day, I still look for more magical girl shows and sometimes boys shows. Just to add to the podcast as well. It's really no wonder why this podcast means a lot to me. And I don't know about anyone else because I can't speak for them. But that's really something I do look. So ultimately, I will say that if you are looking for something that's episodic, you can watch Fetty Ronmaru if you want to. But if you're looking for something story driven, then you can look at my podcast to see if there's anything like that. The more I look at these here, I start asking myself if I should find myself another series that's short. But I'll have to see when the time comes. So I guess that being said, I do apologize if this video isn't as long as you guys want it to be, but hopefully when I do my next Magical Girl podcast or topic or whatever I do, I don't know what it'll be, I want to try to do something that I hope it won't make up for anything it is. But it'll probably be 2 videos like last month, but I can't guarantee what that will be. But until then, I thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay filming-tastic. I'll see you all around.